Today's daf we're going to be learning is Ketubot Pei Hey. Today's daf is sponsored by Heather Stone in loving memory of her grandmother, Rose Shivak, Rachel Leah Bat Aharon Vigolda, on her 37th year at site. We use her brass candlesticks on Shabbat. May her neshama have an aliyah. Today is a day of stories. We're going to have a lot of different cases. We're going to start with cases that relate to our sugya. Let's just review our sugya very quickly. We were talking about a case where a person dies and leaves behind heirs, a wife who needs a ketubah, and mostly we're not really going to deal with the wife today, but ba'alei chov, people who are owed money by this person. And the question is, if they seize the money, the property, or whatever it might be, not really the property, but objects, is it valid? So if you remember, we had a machlok of Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva. If it's, let's say, perot hatlushim in a karka, and right, if they're fruits or something that's detached on the ground, and we saw later that it would have to be in some public place, whether really in the middle of the street or even in a side alleyway. Rabbi Tarfon would say, the fact that they grabbed it, that's valid. Rabbi Akiva says, what are you talking about, right? Right? There's and then there was the other machloket, right? Rabbi Akiva says that's no good. It goes to the yorshim in rachamim badin, right? There's no in mirachamim badin. There's no mercy. We don't have any mercy when it comes to judgment. We basically rule with the yatomim. They have the rights to the land. Nobody can go seize it. So we're going to start with a bunch of cases of people seizing things from someone who was dead, or we did see that Rabbi Akiva concedes that if they had seized it in the lifetime of the person, it would be valid. But sometimes, and we'll see a case like that today, like we saw yesterday, it's not always so clear at what point they seized the possessions. If they can't prove it, then not. And then, because one of the cases is going to have a woman involved, for some reason, I don't really know why, but the Gemara is going to then bring two other cases having to do with money issues, but not the same kind of situation, not like after death that somebody took documents or something, but it's going to be something else, just another two cases of women being in a situation where they were having a disagreement with someone about money. And then we'll get back to our topic. So we start off with the story, which, as I kind of mentioned yesterday, we're going to see the rabbis using their power as knowledgeable and knowing the halacha to kind of to help themselves. It's a little bit of a tricky situation, and we'll see what the punchline of the story is, and that people were not exactly so thrilled with the way they behaved. Yemer bar Chashu, a guy, Yemer bar Chashu, have a masik bezuze bahu gav. He had someone who owed him money. Shachav v'shavik arba. The guy died and left a boat. Amarle l'shluche, so Yemer bar Chashu tells his messenger, Zil tafsan yala, go and grab the boat, because I'm owed money, and go grab the boat for me in place of the money he owes me. Azal tafsa, so the messenger goes out, grabs the boat. Okay, if I didn't mention, we're 4 lines at the bottom of Pedal and Amud Bet. Pagu be Rav Papa v'Rav Huna b'Reid Rav Yoshua. Rav Papa and Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yoshua, come over. They bump into the shaliach who's grabbing the boat, and they happen to have also been owed money by this person, so they obviously had some personal interest in this. Amrulei, they said to him, "At tofes lebalchov b'mkom shachav la'achirim." You're doing the following thing. You're grabbing something, not for yourself. You're grabbing something for somebody else who's owed money, in a case where he also owes other people money. Okay, so what? Well, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, tofes lebalchov b'mkom shachav la'achirim lo kana. You can't do that. You can't, okay, if we're all owed money and I send my messenger to get it, okay, I can't do that. I have to go myself. If I want to fight with you and I want to claim rights to something, it gives me an unfair disadvantage if I could send somebody else. Okay, it's a good question why this is really true. In fact, it's actually very tricky, this whole thing, because Rashi in the Sugin Bava Metzia, when it really talks about this, actually says that Tofes lebalchov b'mkom shachav la'achirim is really more a case, not like our case. He says it's really more a case where someone owes a bunch of people money, and some person comes up, I didn't send them, they know that I'm owed money, but I didn't ask them, and they go and they grab this for me. That's a problem. Rashi says, if I sent a messenger, though, so what? He can act in my place. Which the commentaries all ask, but this sugya doesn't fit in with Rashi, because This sugya is clearly where Yamar Bar Chashu sent a messenger, and they told the messenger, you can't do this. So it's a very big question as Rashi's interpretation, and that's why many don't take his interpretation and think that even sending a messenger doesn't work. Okay, because the easiest way to think about it is it just gives me an unfair advantage, basically, because I can send someone else to do it. I don't have to go myself. And if a bunch of us are owed money, you have to go yourself to do it. It's like saving a seat for someone, right? Now we're in Yomi, it's hard to get seats, right? In shul, and if you save a seat for someone, there's a whole debate about whether you can really do that or not. Is it fair to save a seat for someone or not? When, right, I'm obviously not talking about a shul where you have your own set seats. But if you have your set seats and you're saving a seat, or I see someone's writing about someone standing in a parking spot, right? It's a great example. Right? In Israel, this happens a lot where you try to get into a parking spot and someone's standing there, literally with their body, saving the spot for someone who's coming. Is that fair? Like, this is up for grabs for all of us. Now, it's a little bit different because that's hefker. Okay, both the situations I gave are where there's nobody really who owns the spot. Okay, whereas in this case, we're talking about we're actually owed money. Okay, we're all owed money, but somebody comes along and has someone else do it for them. So anyway, they say you can't do this. So they basically kick the guy out of there. And immediately, tafsua inu. They both grab the boat. Okay, their whole thing was, right, the boat is ours. I see you're all saying that the parking thing goes on in many other places as well, not just in Israel. Pleased to know that. Okay, so now, Rav Papa Mimlach Maluche. They each did an act of acquiring this boat. So Rav Papa started oaring the boat. Okay, started, moving the boat with his oars. Rav Huna Bereid Rav Yoshua Mimatech Leba'ashla. He pulled it with ropes. So each one rowed, one pulled it with ropes in showing it's mine. Now we get to a big sugya in Bava Metzia, right? The first sugya in Bava Metzia, two people grabbing a talit. This one says kula sheli. This one says kula sheli. So same thing happens here. Mar ana kanina lekule. One says, I acquired the entire boat. Umar mar ana kanina lekule. And the other rabbi says, I acquired the entire boat. Paga behura Pinchas bar Ami. Pinchas bar Ami shows up on the scene. Amar lehu says to them, what are you guys doing? Remember, Rav and Shmuel said it's only if the boat, if you're holding by Rabbi Tarfon, which in any case we don't really hold by. If you're holding by Rabbi Tarfon, but it has to be in the public domain. This boat is not standing in the middle of the street, it's in the water. So Amar Lahu, all of a sudden, right, you notice these rabbis fighting with each other, but they're all agreeing about certain things. When it came to Yamar Bar Chamu Shaliach, they were in agreement. When it came to Rav Pinchas, they were in agreement. They said, what are you talking about? We took it from in the middle of the boat was floating in the current in the water. That's in the middle of that's like the middle of the street. That's the place where all the boats are, and there's a lot of people, and it's exactly like Munachim B'Reshut Arabim. So don't argue with us about that. In the meantime, Atu l'Kamei Rabba. This case continues to keep going because why? Well, because the Yorshim, the heirs, want to get their boat back. It's unfair these rabbis took it. And also they're fighting with each other. Who has rights to it? Rava says to them, the biggest insult, Amar lehu, kake chivare meshachi glima di'inashe. You guys are like white geese who take clothes off of other people. It's a very strange thing. If you want to insult someone, I'm not sure this is the thing you come up with. But the best interpretation I saw is white geese means you have white beards. Right? You look like rabbis. You have that look. You're a rabbi and like you're an elder who has his senses about him, but you're acting like a child. You're grabbing clothes off of other people, right? You're basically stripping these orphans of their boat. Hachi Amar Rav Nachman. Don't you know that Rav Nachman says, Vehu shetvasa mechayim. He could have really said, we hold like Rabbi Akiva, but instead, and it's a good question why he says it like this, what he's saying is, Rabbi Akiva only thinks that you grabbing something is valid if you did it during the lifetime of the person who owed you money. But you didn't do it in the lifetime. You did it after his death. And for sure, it goes to the orphans because we hold like Rabbi Akiva. So basically, after these rabbis went through this whole thing, they basically get knocked aside and said, you're totally wrong in what you're doing. And they really get, Rava gets very upset with the way they behave and puts them in their place. Avimi berei de Rabbi Avau, have a masik bezuze bechosai. Avimi, the son of Rabbi Avau, has money he owes to someone in Bechozai. Every time we mention Bechozai, I remind you, it's a place that was far away from the mainland of Babylonia. So usually people don't go themselves, they send messengers. So Shadrinu biyad chama berei de Rabba bar Avau. Remember, he's the son of Rabbi Avau. It seems like Rabba is also the son of Rabbi Avau. This is probably his nephew. Okay, so his nephew comes and he's the messenger. He goes to return the money that he's owed. Azal parim. So he goes and he returns the money. But Amar Lahu, he says to them, Havli Shtara. Now, normally when you return a loan, there's a promissory note, you get the promissory note back when you pay the money back, and you rip up the promissory note so that they don't claim the money again. So the nephew of Avimi, this Chama goes, pays the money, and then says to them, give me the shtar. Reasonable. Amrule, they said to him, Sitraininu. Oh, that 400 zuz you just paid me, I'm just making up an amount. The 400 zuz, I think in the Bechozai story last time was 400 zuz, and then it went up in value, if you remember. Anyway, the 400 zuz you just paid me for your uncle, that money, that was for some other loan that we had, an oral agreement, not this written one. This written one, he still owes us the money for. Now, this shaliach did a very poor job, because now, not only did he pay the money back, now these guys are going to come after him for a second loan. And he basically, this is what we say, right? Don't pay the money until the end, because right, until you get what you want, because in the end, he's got nothing to show for it. So not only that, but when he gets home, Atul Commando of Nothing, he goes to his grandfather and he says, help me out here. You know, what do I do? Amar lei, itlach sadeh de paratinu. Do you have witnesses that saw you paying the money back to them? Amar lei, lo, no witnesses. Amar lei, right? This is it. You're done for. Migo yicholim lomar lo ayu dvarim me'olam yicholim nami lemeimar sitraininu. They have a migo. Remember what a migo means. They could lie. If they had a better lie and they don't use that better lie, then they're going to be believed by their less good lie. What's their best lie? Their best lie is to say, I don't know what you're talking about. You never paid us the money. Now, could they say that? They could, because you have no witnesses. If you have witnesses to show for it, then they wouldn't have a better lie. They wouldn't be able to say, this never happened. You never paid us back the money. So because they could say, you never paid us back the money, and they'd be believed because you have no witnesses to show that you paid the money back, therefore, their claim that you paid them back, but it was to cover some oral agreement they had with Avimi, basically makes them believed. So you really have no claim. So now the question becomes what? Well, there's different characters here, right? There's the messenger who messed up. And because of that, Avimi is going to have to pay all this extra money. He's going to have to repay the loan a second time. So le'inyan shalume shaliach mai. The question is the shaliach responsible to pay? Does the nephew, is it his loss or is it Avimi's loss? To which Rav Ashi says, it depends. Am Rav Ashi, chazina. We look at the situation. If he said, if it all depends on how he sent his nephew to this, on this mission. Did he say specifically, take the shtar and then pay the money? Then he was wrong because he didn't do what he was supposed to do. And remember, we've learned, shaliach who messes up, right, and doesn't do what he's supposed to do, he becomes responsible. If he said, have zuze shkol shtar, but if he did exactly as he was told to pay the money and then get the document. So he did that. Now, of course, he didn't get the document, but it wasn't his fault. They wouldn't give it to him. Then lo mishalem, then he doesn't have to pay. That's what Rav Ashi says. However, the Gemara says that's not true though. Velohi, bein kach u bein kach mishalem. No matter what the shaliach has to pay, and this is a term we're going to see many times when it comes to shlichut. To Amarle, litakuni shadartich velo la'avute. I sent you to fix things for me. I didn't send you to mess things up for me. And all you did was mess things up for me. That means by you clearly did not do what I sent you to do, because I sent you to pay back this particular loan. And in the end, you didn't even pay back that loan. So therefore, the shaliach is going to be responsible. Hi, next story. Now we get to our women's stories. There was a woman. Somebody gave her a stack of promissory notes to watch for him because promissory notes are worth whatever, right? They're IOUs. Someone owes me money. I give it to somebody else to watch. That has monetary value in and of itself. So they're watching it for me. Now what happens? Atu Yorshi, katavu lemina. Now, he dies, and the heirs come back and say, okay, give us all the promissory notes back. Amr lehu, mechayim tafisna lehu. She says, I was owed money by this guy. So I took them when he was still alive, which remember Rabbi Akiva says you can do. I took them when he was still alive for myself because he owed me money. So these notes that I was watching, these promissory notes, have monetary value. He owed me money, so I just kept the promissory notes for myself. Now, what's the big problem? There's no moment in time that we can put our finger on where she became the owner of them. She claims, right? It's just, they were in her house, right? Yesterday they were in her house and they were his. Today, whatever that day today was, they were in her house. She decided, I'm collecting this from my loan, for the loan he owes me. So she claims it all happened at a certain point, right? So it's tricky because I see what you're writing, that she didn't seize it. She sort of did seize it, but we don't know when she seized it, right? Because there's no seizing when usually you seize it, you take like the boat. They grabbed it and they took it into their domain. Here, it was in her domain to begin with. Now it was in her domain as someone else's, but she claims, I took it as mine. So now, after the Commando of Nothing, the case comes before Nothing Amrala. He says to her, tries to figure out what could be a proof. So what could be a good proof is if you have witnesses that show that he came to collect these promissory notes from you to get them back, and you said, I'm not giving them to you because you owe me money. If you have witnesses that happened, then I'll believe you. Then you have a claim. So Amrale, lo. She says to him, no, I don't have witnesses. Right? This seems to be a theme. He says, well, then you really have no claim that you grabbed it in his lifetime, and therefore this is the first time you come in a public way and saying these are mine, and that's after his death, and therefore you don't have a claim. They have to go to the heirs. So the first case fits very well in with our structure that we're talking about, all sorts of cases where people seize things, even though it's a bit of a different kind of seizing, but seize things trying to claim ownership over them. The next stories really have nothing to do with this. As I said, they have to do with other monetary issues, but other issues come up entirely and not connected, but seemingly because there's women here, and that's why. Which, by the way, is just interesting in terms of our Masechet, and particularly our parak about all the husband's rights to his wife's property. Here we see all these women who had their own property and had their own issues with their money and took it to court. Okay, we don't know what the story is, but she was supposed to swear to someone about something that had happened, right? Sometimes there's cases where we have a case where, depending on the details, you might have to swear in order to, usually it's to swear to keep the money in your hands. You have something probably she claimed, and then she had to swear to keep it in her hands. But Amrele bat Rav Chisda, the daughter of Rav Chisda, if you want to read more about her, Shuli wrote this week, Shuli Mishkan in Flashback, all about the daughter of Rav Chisda. She comes up a lot in the Gemara. You might remember her from the story of Chuma with the wife of Abaye, right? The widow of Abaye, who revealed her arms in the court. And she was kind of a feisty woman, this about Rav Chisda. So she comes to her, she was also very knowledgeable, and she comes to her husband and she says, she's married to Rava. She comes to Rava, who, right, this woman came in court before Rava needed to swear, and she says, Yadana bada chashuda ashvua. I know that this woman is suspected that she lies when she swears. Okay, there's all sorts of reasons someone could be chashuda ashvua. It's a thing that sometimes you have someone. What happens then is if they're supposed to swear in order to keep something in their hands, instead of having them swear, we basically ask the other side to swear instead of them. And then they can swear and take the money, which usually you don't swear to take money. There's a certain exceptions to the rule. We've seen that before. So now, so Rava said, okay, if my wife says she's not trusted, then we're going to switch it and make the other person swear. Now, next story, which is going to be connected, Rav Papa and Rav Ada bar Matna. Okay, there was a case where they were both sitting in front of Rava. So a star came in front of them. Amarle Rav Papa yadana beid shtara paruahu. I know that this person has a promissory note, but I know that someone already collected. Okay, meaning they paid back the money. And therefore, they can't use this star to collect what they want to collect. Amarle, Ika inishachrine bahade damar. So Rabbi says to him, was there anybody else with you who could testify with you? Because one witness is not effective in court. Amarle, lo. He says, no, I was the only one who saw the person paying back the money. Amarle, afagavdi kamar, edechalav klubhu. Even though you're a trustworthy person, but edechad is nothing, I can't accept your testimony. Amarle Rav Ada bar Matna. Rav Ada bar Matna was sitting there, says, below yehe Rav Papa kibat Rav Chisda. But wait, you trusted your wife's testimony to basically switch the shvua, the oath, to the other person. So why don't you trust Rav Papa? It's almost like he's, getting, right, what do you say? He's sticking it to him and saying, wait, but I saw you listen to your wife, to which he answers a very interesting answer. Now, one could definitely distinguish between the cases. Having someone take a shvua is not ruling based on one witness. It's basically just switching it, that we're going to have the other person take the oath and not her. So it's not exactly the same thing. It's not like he said that woman is wrong. He just said we're going to put the burden of the oath on the other side. But anyway, tries to compare. So comes Rav Chisda and he said, Rav, and he says, "But Rav Chisda kimle b'kava." I know this woman would never lie. I know her very well. I know that there's nothing that would ever make her lie. Right? You see how much he really trusted her. Therefore, I trusted her. Mar lo kimle b'kava. I don't have that same relationship with you. I don't know for sure that you would never lie. I don't know how, right? Which is very insulting to Rav Papa, right? But I don't know that about you. So now notice it was Rav Ada bar Matna who said it about Rav Papa, right? And he said, I don't know Rav Papa that well. I'm a Rav Papa. So Rav Papa says, okay, well, fine. You don't trust me. But now that you told me this, that if you trust someone really well, then you can believe them, like two witnesses, then Hashadam Amar, Kimle Bigave, Hashadam Amar, Kimle Bigave Milti. Now that you're telling me that this is a thing, that you can, if you trust someone entirely, you can accept what they say. Kigon Abamar Bure, like Abamar, my son, de Kimle Bigave, who I know would never ever lie. It's interesting. They always choose family members, right? They're maybe the ones you know the best. You know they wouldn't lie. Karana Shtar Apume. I would rip up a star based on his testimony. If he told me this star was paid back, I would rip it up. To which the Gemara says, Karana Salkadatach? No way can you rip up a promissory note based on one witness testimony, even if you really believe them. To which they say, Ela Marana Shtara Apume. I would weaken. I would basically, if my son told me it was paid back, I would severely weaken this star. And what that means is a very good question. There's many, many opinions of the Rishonim to understand this question. What this line, what does it mean to weaken a star? So I'll give you one example, but there's many different commentaries here. One is to say that if, let's say, someone comes in and said, so-and-so owes me money, then what would he do? He would say, oh, it's true, he claims he owes money, but unless you swear, you're not going to get your money, okay? Or he makes one of the sides swear, okay? So basically he's going to say it weakens it to the extent that he won't use normally a shtar as enough of admissible evidence in court to say you're owed money, but this time he would say you have to swear to say you're owed the money in order to get the money. So again, right, I see you're all writing that family members is tricky. Again, what's clear here is they're not exactly using it, and that's what they say to Rav Papa. Clearly you're not using this to rip up a shtar, but they're using it, both of these cases, using it as side evidence, using it as saying, right, this woman isn't trusted. That I can believe my wife to say this woman isn't trusted, and therefore put the burden of the oath on the other side. Or the shtar is paid back. So if your son tells you that, it's true, it's not admissible evidence in court. Number one, it's only one witness. Number two, it's his son. But he will, remember, also the son's not related to both sides, right? It's just related to the judge. But still, that might be an issue. But the point is, he'll accept it in order to say that the shtar standing by itself is not going to be strong enough. We're going to need something to go with it in order to allow this person to get their money. Okay, so this is all about trusting people, really, because it's interesting. Rav Chisda trusted his wife. He didn't trust Rav Papa. And also the woman with the shvua wasn't trusted. There's a lot about trust and not trust. Third story of the woman. Another woman who was supposed to take an oath in the court of Rav Vivi bar Abaye. So the other side says, listen, you're supposed to take a shvua. Well, I want you to take it in the city. Now, unclear, there's many different versions of this text. Is it in the city, in my city, in her city? Unclear. Okay, we'll go with one interpretation. I'll just read the next three words and I'll explain. She might end up being embarrassed and will tell the truth. In other words, he thought she was lying. And he said, if I make her, let's go with this city. If I make her do it in the city means the city where our transaction took place. Because there, she's not going to outright lie in front of all the people in the city, because probably she's going to assume somebody knows the truth there, because that whatever transaction happened between them, which we don't get the details of, happened in that city. She's going to be embarrassed to get up in that city and swear falsely in front of all those people when somebody knows that she's swearing falsely. So he insists on her swearing somewhere else outside the court. Okay, this is why it's important, because Amra Lahu, that's not going to be the issue at all. Issue is this next line. She says to the judges, listen, I want a document that says that I swore about this so that I can easily get my money after I take this shvua, after I take this oath. So she says to them, I don't want to have to go, like, it's okay. You want to make me swear in the city, which could have even been a different city they're making her go to. She says, I don't want to have to come back here and get a document from you later. So give me a document now. This is opposed to some of the other people we saw today that didn't do it in front of witnesses, didn't anything. This woman was smart. She said, I want it in writing, and I want it in writing now. I don't want to have to come back to you. So she says, give me Kitvuli Zachvata. Give me a Zachvata. Zachvata is a document that says you swore about this topic in the city. Right? So that I'll have it right after I swear. So write it up now, she says. And then you'll give it to me after I swear. Amali Rabbi bar Abaye Kitvula says, okay, we can write it now, even though she hasn't sworn yet. So Amar Pape, Mishum da atitu mimulaya maritu milamulyata. This comes up a lot, this line. Some people explain it differently, but we're going to explain it the way it's normally explained, which is Rav Papi says to Rabbi bar Abaye, you come from a family of cut off people. That's from your family of Eli, who were told that they're going to die young. Because of that, you say things that are cut off, meaning things that don't make any sense. What kind of ridiculous thing is it that you're going to write this shtar for this woman? Ha'amar Rava. Rava says, Haya shrata dedaine, mikatva mikame denachvu sadeh, chatimat yadayu psula. Now we're going to talk about ashrata. That's something else. When a document comes to court, we've seen this before, it has signatures. We have to verify the signatures. So what do? Witnesses come and say, I recognize the signature, I recognize the signature, and then the dayanim write in ashrata. This document is a valid document. Their signatures have been validated by witnesses. If they write that document, this is a valid document and it's been approved by witnesses before the witnesses come, that's not a valid ashrata. Why? Alma mechse kishikra. It looks like they're writing a lie. You can't write the words, witnesses came before us and validated the signatures when the witnesses haven't come. Likewise, hachanami mechse kishikra. You can't say the same thing here. You can say the same, you can't write on this document, this woman swore in front of the city when she hasn't yet sworn. That's a lie. You're basically telling a lie. Later. But the fact is, it's not true. You can actually do this. Mida Rav Nachman, as you see with Rav Nachman, the Amar Rav Nachman, Omer Haya Rabbi Meir. Now we're moving into get. When a woman gets a get from a man, the get has to be written or signed. There's a big debate about it. Does it need to be written lishma for her, specifically for him and her? Or does it only have to be signed lishma for him and her? Okay, as long as the witnesses know they're signing it for these two people, it's fine. So let's say, what's the classic nafkamina? You find a get in the garbage. It's not signed yet. It has the name of so-and-so and so-and-so. And it happens to be that's your name and your husband's name. Perfect. We found it in the garbage. Let's use this. Right? You say nowadays, what's the big deal? No, but you have to get a sofer to write it. It costs money. This is a much better solution. It's already done. Perfect. So Omer Haya Rabbi Meir says, he thinks you only need the signature to be lishma for this particular person. And therefore, these people. So therefore, even if you find it in the garbage and it happens to have your names in it, as long as the witness is signed, specifically knowing that you're going to give this get to your wife, that works. And even the rabbis, but the rabbis who disagree and say it has to be written lishma, by the way, that's only for get. But a regular document, you could do this kind of thing. So this is like finding it in the garbage, because it's now here it's a little bit tricky because it's not clear. Did she want the judges to already sign the document and then it was already signed? Or was it not signed? Because here it seems like as long as they sign it, it's fine, according to everybody. But it's a good question. The Ritva says the judges actually can't sign it, but other commentaries say they actually could sign it. And the only time it's really going to be an issue is if they're really writing an untruth. This is something that was about to happen. Now, of course, you never really know if it's going to happen, but they claim that if it was really about to happen, then it's fine. So there's a bit of lack of clarity exactly about all these cases, and how all these cases connect is also not so clear, because now they're going to quote another case. How do we know that the rabbis, this is just to prove how we know the rabbis agree when it comes to other documents. If we wrote a document that you owe me money, I'm lending you 100 shekel or $100, and you pay me back today, and then you want to borrow another $100. I can't reuse that shtar for this second loan. Why? So there's a difference between an oral agreement and a written agreement. We saw that today before. He had a written one and an oral one. The oral one can't be taken from land that the borrower sold, right? Normally, you can go get it from nechasim mishuabadin, land lien property. But there's no lien if it's just an oral agreement, because how are the sellers supposed, when I go buy something, how are the buyers supposed to know that there was a lien on the property? So only if it was written. Now, if we wrote this document for the loan and you pay back the money, the shibud is done. You're finished, right? Any land you sold, obviously it was the same day, it doesn't matter, but any land you sold was already not liened anymore. If we want to reuse that shtar, there won't be a lien on the property, but it'll look like there is, and therefore we can't use this shtar because the lien is done, okay? In order to have a new lien on new property, we'd have to write a new document. So now, what does this have to do with our case? Well, what does it say here? Tama, the reason is we're clearly not worried about it looking like a lie. If we were worried about looking like a lie, it would have said, because it looks like a lie. Because I didn't loan you money right now, right? I loaned you money this morning, but now there's a new loan. And if we use the old shtar, it looks like a lie, because the old shtar was saying, I lent you money and it hasn't happened yet till later. So that proves that the rabbis hold that even though it might get, you would need chatima lishma in a shtar about regular things, you wouldn't need it. You could theoretically write it. Here, there's a different issue at stake, which is the shibud, but it's not the issue of it looking like a lie, because that document really had nothing to do with this loan. So in the end, they seem to say that the woman was right in demanding that they write this zachvata, and you really could write a zachvata. But again, there's a bit of a debate about what exactly the case is. Did they sign it or did they not sign it? Because with the get case, notice, the get in the end has to be signed, lishma. So it's unclear exactly, although it could be that with a regular, maybe you wouldn't need it, a regular document. Okay. Haul Gavra de Afkid Shev Marganita. Now we're going to start a series of 3 stories. This is going to be very easy because they're going to be the exact, once you get the first story, all 3 stories are exactly the same. Why they brought 3 stories? There seems to be a threes here, right? We had 3 stories of women. Now we're going to have 3 stories of really the exact same thing. Just the object is going to be different. That's it. So it's going to make this side of the daf very simple to get through. We're back to, now that we finished the women's stories, we're back to the orphans. But this is a different issue that comes up with the orphans. Somebody gives me 7 pearls to watch. They're wrapped up in a sheet. In the house of Bey Rabbi Miyasha Bar Bered Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. A lot of people here, we get all their grandparents, someone who was important to them. So he happens to be the grandson of Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. Not clear why they're telling us this. But anyway, He's watching over these pearls. Shachiv Rab Miyasha below Pakib. What happens? He has these pearls in his house that he's been watching. He dies without having told his children anything about these pearls. So it's not clear. Do they belong to him? Do they belong to someone else? And if so, who do they belong to? So we have no idea. So some guy comes and claims they're mine. The children claim, what are you talking about? They're in our father's possession. They're his. Rabbi Ami. So Rabbi Ami says, Amrle. He gives them two reasons why we're going to give this money back to the guy who claims they're his. How do we know they're his? Well, Chada, very interesting claim. We know that Rabbi Yasha is not a wealthy person. Therefore, it's very unlikely that these pearls are his because he didn't have money. He wouldn't have money to have these pearls be his own. Ve'od. Ha-kayav siman. And in addition, this person gave a siman. He said, I had 7 pearls. They were wrapped in a sheet. He explained exactly how they were wrapped. That must prove that he's right. Okay, so now it's not enough, it seems, each one by itself, but the combination. The commentaries have a lot of questions about this Rabbi Miyasha not being rich. The first obvious question is, who knows who's rich and who's not? And just because somebody is not wealthy doesn't mean they don't have pearls in their house. Maybe they had this one thing that their grandparents passed down to them and they've kept it always. There's no way to really know just because someone appears not to be rich that they don't have something of value in their house. So that's the first big question. There's other questions as well. I mean, how you never really know the worth of a person. You try to figure out who's wealthy, who's not. Nobody really knows. So in any case, it's interesting that they use that as a claim, but again, it's used together with. It's not the only claim. That together with somebody came and gave simanim, right? We can assume that it was likely that that's the story. Now the Gemara says, by the way, or maybe he says this himself, Rabbi Ami, lo amaran ela de lo ragil da'ayav v'nafik lahatam. But this is only if people don't often come into Rabbi Yasha's house. People go in and out of his house a lot. In other words, there's 3 questions. There's 3 potential people it could belong to. It could belong to the orphans. That we've proven, well, he's not wealthy. Probably it's not theirs. Number 2, it could belong to this person who's coming to us. 3, it could belong to some other person. That's maybe he just knows and is able to give us the siman because he was in his house a lot and saw them. Maybe Rabbi Yasha showed it to him. So if it's a very open house where people are always coming in, then we can be worried. Again, it really depends also, they don't say this, but it would obviously depend on where they were. If he hid them, then obviously if people come in his house all the time, no one's going to see them. But if they were out on a display, and on a shelf in his house and everyone could see it, then there'd be concern that someone else could just easily come and bring a siman. So again, you have to use your common sense as the dayan in this case. Next case, again, the exact same thing. He kept a silver goblet. He had it in the house of Chasa. Chasa was watching it for him. Shachiv Chasa v'lo pakid. He dies without telling them anything about it. Onto the Commando of Nothing. This time they go in front of Rabbi Nachman. Amar lehu yadana be. He says, I know, but Chasa delo amid. He's not wealthy. Ve'od hakayav simana, and also he brought a siman. And again, they say, it's only where people don't go in and out. Right? It could still be belonging to somebody else, and this person just saw it and could give us the simani. Again, we get he's the brother of Rav Safra. Keep telling their connections. But here the story is, they gave him fancy silk clothing to watch. Shachib Ravdimi below Pakid. Again, he dies and didn't leave any instructions. Ata the Commando Rabbi Abba. They go before Rabbi Abba this time. Amar lehu chada diadana beber Ravdimi dilo amid. I know he's not wealthy. Ve'od hakayav simana. And also the person gave a siman. Ve'lo amaran ela. Again, they tell us, in case you didn't remember this, ve'lo amaran ela dilo ragil da'al v'nafik lahatam. Ava ragil da'al v'nafik lahatam. People normally go in and out of his house. You can be worried that maybe they saw it and are bringing a siman, but not necessarily that it's theirs. Now, what if somebody said before he died, this is, they did give instructions, but not clear instructions. They said, Nichasai letovi. Go give my nichasim to Tovia. Shachiv. Ata Tovia. A guy shows up. His name is Tovia. He says, I'm Tovia. I'm the one he left it to, right? He didn't give a last name. I'm a Rabbi Yochanan, Hare Bat Tuvia. Okay, Tuvia showed up. It must be him. Amar Tuvia, va'ata Rav Tuvia. What if he said, I want to give all my stuff to Tuvia, but he didn't say Rav Tuvia? And the guy who we know is a Rav. Wouldn't be you would call him by his first name if he was a Rav, although maybe yes. So let's see. L'Tuvia amal, l'Rav Tuvia lo amal, and therefore it's not going to Rav Tuvia. The inish digispa, but if it's someone who is the rabbi, is someone who's a good friend of his, then he might actually call him Tuvia, even though he's a Rav. Then hagispe, then we can assume he's, not careful about always using his term Rav, and therefore really it could be he was referring to him. Atu shnei Tuvia. What if two Tuvias show up and say, it's for me? Okay, shachen v'tamid chacham. One is a neighbor, and one is a Torah scholar. Tamid chacham kodem. Tamid chacham gets it. Why? Okay, first of all, the commentaries say unless you have reason to believe it was if you really have reason to believe it was the neighbor gets it. But without any clarity about who it was, it's going to go to the Tamid chacham. Rashi says it's because people on their deathbed want to do good deeds, and they probably would give something to a Tamid chacham rather than to their neighbor. What if it's karov Tamid chacham, a relative in a Tamid chacham? Because often people do give things to their relatives. Still Tamid chacham kodem. Now they ask, what about shachen v'karov man? What about a neighbor or a relative? Tashma, we'll learn from the pasuk. Tov shachen karov me'ach rachok. Pasuk in Mishlei, right? A neighbor who's close is better than a sibling who's far or a relative who's far away. So therefore, if it's a close neighbor and a far relative, we're going to give it to the neighbor. Shnehem krovim, shnehem shchenim, shnehem chachamim. What if they're all the same, right? They have the same status. They're all deciding all these hierarchies. Shuda d'daine. We let the judges decide. Now, this is always whenever we have shuda d'daine, comes up a lot. There's two options to understanding it. Either we say the judges come in and try to assess. They try to learn, right? Judges are trained to try to figure out the truth. And they try to get to the truth, which is the one who's more, who do we think is the more likely candidate that he was giving this to? So they ask all sorts of questions of the neighbors, of the relatives, of the, of the family. Who do you think? And they make an assessment. Some people say no. The judges just come and arbitrarily decide. It's not that they're trying to get to what the absolute truth is. No, they create their new truth. And the judges can do this because of a concept called hefker beitin hefker. The beitin can decide your money belongs to someone else. They have the power to do that. So with that power, they're the ones who can decide who's going to get this money, even though theoretically they might be taking it from someone and giving it to someone else. It's not that we think they're going to get to, 90% of the truth. It's just that we're giving them the power. They have the jurisdiction to do this. So it's a bit of a different approach about how to understand it according to those two different interpretations. Amalei Rava lebered Rav Chia bar Avin. Rava said to the son of Rav Chia bar Avin, I'm going to tell you something really important that your father used to say. Hada Amar Shmuel, hamocher shtar chov lechavero, v'chazar umachalo machul, va'afilu yoresh mocher. So first, Shmuel said, if I sell you a promissory note, you owe me $100, someone owes me $100, and I sell it to you. So you now can collect the $100. But if I go back to the person who owes me the money and I said, listen, I'm going to be mochel. I'm going to forego this loan. You don't owe me the money. Now you're stuck. You can't get your money, right? Theoretically, I sold it to you. I shouldn't have the power to do that. Shmuel said I can actually do it. And even if I died and gave it to my heirs, they can be mochel on that loan. They can forego that loan, even though I sold you the promissory note. Now, the commentaries say, obviously, you can come back to me and claim, give me my $100 because I made you lose, right, your money. But still, I have the power, even though I sold you the promissory note, I have the power to basically cancel this loan. However, okay, but Modeh Shmuel, but Shmuel admits though, if I went into a marriage with a promissory note, and now my husband has rights to that shtar, I no longer have the power. And this finally, we go back to where we were up to about the husband having rights to the woman's property. He has rights to my contracts, my promissory notes. In that case, I actually can't cancel the loan. If I sold it to someone, I could. And then, by the way, they could obviously come back and claim, give me the money, but they'd have to go to me and not to the other person. But if I did it if I got married and brought it into the marriage, I wouldn't be able to do it because I don't have rights to that document anymore. Okay, we'll stop here for today. We'll start with this next story because it really starts and continues on the next step, which is another story. If you remember, we just had about the relatives of Rabbi Yochanan, who he gave advice to. Now we're going to have the relatives of Rabbi Nachman and advice he gives them. And it's actually going to be similar to a different story of Rabbi Yochanan and his relatives that we saw previously. It's going to have a similar ending to that. So we'll get to that story tomorrow. Today was story day. Okay, with that, we will finish today's daf and see you tomorrow.